Kentucky basketball picks up a solid win over the Ole Miss Rebels at home. 83-71 was the final score. We break down the game on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast specifically, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Kentucky is brought to you by Run Your Pool. March Madness is here, and Run Your Pool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Kentucky basketball's 83-71 win over the Ole Miss Rebels. It's really a shame because if you didn't watch yesterday's episode, my final score prediction for this matchup was 83-71. If Ole Miss had just simply missed one of their two free throws at the end of the game, I would have gotten this score prediction right. Shame on me for not taking those final two free throws into account. All right, so today we're going to go over the first half. We're going to talk about the second half. We're going to give some final thoughts just to kind of wrap up the recap of this victory. Starting off with the first half here, something that I noted, and I'm sure many of you noted as well, is Kellen Grady had as many shot attempts under the 16-minute break in this game as he did at Arkansas. I believe he had 3 shot attempts in the Arkansas game. He had 3 shot attempts in just 4 minutes against the Rebels. Made a 3 early on. In fact, the Wildcats were shooting really well early on. 3 different guards made a 3 early on in the first half. Kentucky was shooting 75% from the floor at the under 12 break. Just a lot of really, really good stuff from Kentucky's guards. And I said this on yesterday's show, I believe. We talk about it at length on tomorrow's episode with Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC, just talking about different really talented teams in the Southeastern Conference. And I talked at length about Kentucky's guard play and how it's not been as efficient down the stretch as maybe the Wildcats would have liked to have seen. And I definitely think that it's a quality of a championship caliber team, and I certainly think that Kentucky is one of those. It's just the guards have not been shooting fantastic over these past several games. And man, Davion Mintz, Kellen Grady was shooting well early, did not finish the game shooting well, I believe, but Davion Mintz, Sahvir Wheeler, TyTy Washington, who came off the bench in this game for the Wildcats, all 3 of those guys shot really, really well, especially early on. It was really refreshing to see the Wildcats knocking down just about everything that they put up, and that's not the expectation moving forward, right? It's not the expectation for this team, these guards, to knock down just about everything that they put up, but somewhere in between shooting 3 of 12 and shooting like 6 of 8, it would be much appreciated from these guards moving forward. Had a good game early on. Ole Miss also had a relatively difficult time guarding the paint. They had a relatively difficult time guarding the paint the entire game. Oscar Tshiebwe, once again, as he has been essentially all season, really, really big factor in this matchup. Daimion Collins, this is just a completely random note here on my breakdown of the game. Daimion Collins, for the small amount of minutes that he gets, when he's not, and I've seen this before in the past, I don't think he's a great jump shooter, so he's not knocking down a ton of shots outside the rim. I don't think he's going to be asked to much during his Kentucky career, but he does a very good job in the limited minutes that he gets of knocking down fouls when he's not taking jump shots or dunking the ball. He does a phenomenal job, in my opinion, of drawing fouls, and he's got a really good shooting stroke at the foul line. Which is odd considering I think that he's airballed a couple of the threes that he's taken this season, and his jump shots just kind of looked eh. But his free throw form is pure, and I noted early, was like, man, over the past, I'll just say the entire season, he's done a great job of getting to the foul line whenever he can, and I think that's going to be a part of his game that's utilized even more next season, especially if Oscar Tshiebwe leaves. I think you're looking at him and Ware getting a lot more minutes than they do currently this year. duh. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to seeing what Collins brings to the table is all that I was trying to say here. Kentucky, we've talked about this before on the show. They do this thing where if the opponent starts to score in bunches, like they're knocking down stuff, Kentucky starts to panic and freak out themselves on the offensive end. I'm like, okay, we got to keep pace with these guys. Let's start throwing some stuff up. And they'll turn the ball over. They'll take dumb shots. The pace will increase, and they will not be able to control themselves. And I'm not saying that that's how Kentucky plays all the time in high-scoring affairs. In fact, that's not the case. I'm just saying that sometimes Kentucky does that. Well, they did that thing again for about 2 minutes in the first half where they were incredibly turnover prone. They were just fogging things up that didn't need to be thrown up early in the shot clock. I mean, it's a characteristic of this team that I think is just part of who they are at this point in the season. And it's going to be really difficult to shake that if they can at all heading into these final few games of the season. That including postseason play. But I just wanted to notice, like, Kentucky is continuing to do that even when they're at home, and no team's going to be perfect. It's just that there are spurts with this team where you're not coming out of an Ole Miss run or an opposing team's run and saying, okay, well, Kentucky just simply didn't knock down their shots, and Ole Miss is getting a little hot right now. It's like, okay, Kentucky kind of aided Ole Miss in starting their run, kind of creating that spark, kind of lighting that fire. And now the Wildcats are going to have to settle back down and work some of their stuff in properly. And I'm not saying everything in the transition game is bad. In fact, I would much rather prefer an offense to play at a higher pace and to see if they can get shots in transition. It's just the mid-range jumper sometimes it's not the wisest thing to do, especially considering how poorly Kentucky is shooting from the mid-range right now, especially over these past 2 games. I noted a statistic on yesterday's show, and I would like to be able to go pull it up and find it without really boring you guys. But there was a statistic put out, I believe it was by Hoops Insight, had him on the show a few weeks ago, just discussing Kentucky and their 2-point jumpers. And he noted that the Wildcats were shooting a ridiculous number of 2-point jumpers, and they were knocking down a ton of them. And since the Kansas game, I believe Kentucky's shooting 30%, which is somewhere in I believe it's 340th nationally in terms of percentage of 2-point jumpers made. And Kentucky's taking even more 2-point jumpers now, and they're knocking down a considerably less amount. So I don't think that it's the most efficient shot for the Wildcats right now, and I'm curious to see where they go on offense. But they did that thing, to go back to what I was saying, they did that thing where they just kind of freak out for a moment, and then they settled back down. And I'll say, overall, the offensive product in the first half was good. Now, the defensive product was not absolutely fantastic. In fact, Ole Miss had a couple of different looks at the rim where it's just like, we got to get some bodies in the paint. We got to start defending a little bit better. And the Wildcats occasionally struggled in this game to guard the paint. Ole Miss's bigs just simply had a day. Just to really quickly look at the first half stats here before we move on. Let's see. Oscar Tshiebwe had 8 points in the first half, had 5 rebounds as well, an assist, a steal. The team had 12 assists in the first half, which is really impressive. It was 44-35 at the break. Keon Brooks had 4 points. Sahvir Wheeler, 3 of 4 from the floor, 2 of 2 from 3. Would not expect that from a kid that's shooting a little over 30% from 3. Had 8 points, did Sahvir Wheeler. Kellen Grady had 7 points. Davion Mintz had 8 points. TyTy Washington had 7 points, was 3 of 5 from the floor, 1 of 2 from 3. Overall, Kentucky shooting 60% from 3, 58% from the floor. And then Ole Miss finished shooting 50% on the game and then shot 50% in the first half as well. We're going to talk about what happened in the second half in just a second. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about our friends at Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, and it's all thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not even really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating Built Bars. Have you tried the Puffs? Built has this new amazing thing. It's the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They call it Puffs. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They are simply a treat. And not only that, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. These things are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars, including Puffs, are in fact covered in 100% real chocolate. And Built has so many different amazing flavors to choose from. You can go for mint brownie. You could go for salted caramel. You could go for cookies and cream. You could go for coconut. This month they have a new flavor, white chocolate cookies and cream. These flavors are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If Built thinks a flavor might be good, they will make it. It will be delicious, and it will also be good for you. You can go to Built.com right now, and you can use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe here with you. Going to talk about the second half and how the Wildcats struggled a little bit to pull away from the Ole Miss Rebels. Going to break that down here for you. So early, and I mean early, like immediately, like within the first 45 seconds of the second half, a couple of really easy buckets for Tshiebwe. Kentucky did a really good job, in my opinion, in this game. Sahvir Wheeler did a really good job of getting downhill and then dishing the ball off to Tshiebwe and then letting him go to work in the paint. I think the combo there between Wheeler and Tshiebwe was extremely effective in non-conference play, and I was hyping that up. And now we're really getting to see this duo kind of get back to where they were at the beginning of the season now that Wheeler is fully healthy, or at least he looked fully healthy. I'll tell you this also, TyTy Washington looks good to go. At least he did against the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss also decided partially between the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game and that first 45 seconds, it's just like they decided we don't really want to protect the rim. Like early on they were trying, and then after that Oscar Tshiebwe is just like, I think I'll just get as many layups as I want. Thank you very much. Ole Miss was just like, yep, we're just going to step back and try and not get fouls, and we're just going to make it happen. But they didn't. Meanwhile, Tshiebwe also, on the other end, had a really hard time stopping Ole Miss down low. Ole Miss has a kid, number 3, Brooks. He was going ham in this game. Incredibly physical in the paint. Tshiebwe was getting pushed around a little bit, and I think Coach Cal, at one point, I believe they mentioned this on the broadcast, Coach Cal challenged Tshiebwe to go out there and be a little bit more physical against Brooks, and then as soon as the timeout ended, Tshiebwe got another bucket, and he finished the game incredibly strong. The game did get incredibly physical at about the 14, 15-minute mark, and after that point, Ole Miss started to sort of climb back into the game. Matthew Morrell for the Rebels was absolutely balling out in the second half. He was making layups, he was making mid-range jumpers, he was making three-pointers. There was a stretch there where the broadcast highlighted that it was like a 12-4 run for the Rebels, but it felt like more than that because, again, there was a stretch where Ole Miss was just making every single shot that they put up, and partially this was due to the fact that Kentucky was struggling on defense. It was not playing as efficient as they possibly could have. But at the same time, Kentucky, at different points on possessions, was doing everything that they could. They were guarding the post. They were guarding drives that could have potentially gotten to the rim. And they were putting hands in faces when shots got up. And Ole Miss was just simply knocking them down. There's honestly not a whole lot more that you can ask of your team in situations like that, except just to continue to play hard and then to do smart things on the offensive end and not let the game get away from you. At one point, Kentucky had their lead cut to 6 with 3 minutes left in the game, and I was just sitting there going I wasn't panicking. It was just because I felt like Kentucky was eventually going to win the game, but it was just what's going on? This is an Ole Miss team that doesn't shoot well at all. In any category, free throw line, 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, effective field goal percentage. They really struggle with turnovers and blocks as well. What's going on? Why is this offense all of a sudden clicking? And eventually, Kentucky did win. Got a couple of more really nice looks at the rim. Wheeler had a really nice drive to the basket where he got a shot to go up or down, high off the window. It was just a beautiful layup from Wheeler to kind of, I believe, to extend the lead back to 8, and then Kentucky just kind of finished the game off from there. Again, I was 1 point off of the final score prediction in this matchup. I said 83-71. 83-72 was the final score of this game. Kentucky certainly did not cover the spread in this game. BetOnline had this game at 16.5 in favor of the Wildcats. Obviously, Kentucky winning by 12. And something I wanted to share with you here before we moved on. that I thought was a little interesting. I wanted to go over quickly Ole Miss's stats here just on the season. So I mentioned the fact that they don't really shoot well in any department, and they shot 50% in the game. At least that's what they finished with, and they shoot 48% on the year. So they're above average in that category. And then they shot 38.9% from three, and they only shoot 32.8% from three on average on the season. So overall, this was just one of those games where, you can look at the Alabama game, you can look at the LSU game, which are recent matchups here that are kind of similar. But the Wildcats partially struggled to play consistent defense, and then also the opposing team was just knocking down everything that they threw up at different points in this game. And there's part of it's just like, okay, you could play better defense, and then part of it's just like, what can you do? That's just kind of the way it is. I mean, Ole Miss scored 72. Kentucky's giving up 65 a game. I'm not going to complain overall about the product that the Wildcats put out on the court. Ole Miss did end up knocking down 7 3-pointers in this game. And again, like I mentioned, Matthew Morrell knocked down 5 of those 7 3-pointers, had 25 points, was 9 of 16 from the floor, had 4 assists and 2 rebounds to go along with that. You want to try and really stop one of their star players if you can, but if it's just his night, it's just his night. It was Morrell's night. What you going to do? Also, I'll say this. Whenever you have guys like Davion Mintz and Sahvir Wheeler guarding consistently a guy like Matthew Morrell, who is 6'4", things are probably not going to go well. All right, we're going to talk about what happened we're just going to wrap up the recap here. We're going to take a look at some of the stats. As always, I've got my parameters, the 4 things that Kentucky needs to do to win games. We're going to go over and see if Kentucky actually accomplished those 4 things. Going to talk about that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about our friends at Run Your Pool. March Madness, only just a few weeks away. I'm excited. I know you're excited. You really need to start thinking right now about where you're going to be, running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, what you always do, or are you looking this season for something better, something that is the best? Well, we here at Locked On Kentucky, we've done a little bit of research. We've looked out there, and we've decided that we're going to run our brackets with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool also offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. Both are really fun in their own way. And Run Your Pool has options to edit scoring as well. And they offer even more intel with your picks, and it's all stuff that you won't find at ESPN or CBS. And that for me is awesome because I'm a stats geek. I'm a numbers geek. I really love diving into what the individual teams are about. Really love what Run Your Pool has to offer there. And if you got a business, Run Your Pool can help you take some of that madness magic and play alongside your employees, or even you could potentially gain customers from it. Plus, Run Your Pool offers full white glove customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups that you will ever find. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're actually running our brackets over there. There's no truer test than that. And if you want to play against us, you can go to runyourpool.com/lockedon. You can participate for a potential win and a shot at a cash prize. And while you're there, you can create your own pool for your friends and family, and you can enter the code Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. Again, you can enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool at runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning while the person behind the counter orders your parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You yourself have access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is also a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every single customer, and they've got everything that you could ever need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. You can go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. You can write Locked On and how did you hear about us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, wrapping up the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe here with you. If you're watching on YouTube, first of all, if it looks like I've been crying or I am off a 2-week bender, just want you to know my contact's trying to kill me right now. You probably can't see it on the camera, but it is doing everything in its power to make my life miserable at this moment. And if you're listening on podcast format, would love to hear what you have to say about the show. If you want to leave a review, wherever you're listening, I would really appreciate that. And if you're watching on YouTube, would love if you subscribed. It would mean a lot to me. We're going to have a lot coming out here as we get closer and closer to March. I'm going to be at the SEC tournament. It's going to be really, really fun to cover that in person for you guys. Going to be able to break down some of the games that happened in Tampa here in just a couple of weeks. I'm so excited about it, and you're going to want to be following along for all of the Kentucky Wildcats coverage that you can stand. All right, final thoughts here. This matchup between Kentucky and Ole Miss, 83-72 was the final score. I just realized that my math is completely off. I was thinking that this was a 12-point win because in my mind I was thinking about the final score that I had, 83-71. It was an 11-point win. If I said that in the show earlier, I'm an idiot. I apologize. All right, some final thoughts here. Let's go over some of the statistics in this matchup. Kentucky did not get out-rebounded. 31-24 was the total there in favor of the Wildcats. Only 6 offensive rebounds in this game. Not a lot of opportunities to grab boards. Both these teams were shooting really, really well, knocking down a lot of different shots. Kentucky shot 60% from the floor. Ole Miss, like I mentioned earlier, 50% from the floor. Kentucky finished with 18 assists in this game as well. Ole Miss also only turned it over once in the second half. They had 7 turnovers in the first, only 1 turnover in the second half. They were really, really trying to get back into this game. Were not able to do it. Kentucky also only finished with 8 turnovers, had 15 points off of turnovers as well, had 11 fast break points. And probably the weirdest thing in this game, this is the first time in the Wild that this has happened, this game did not feature a lot of fouling. Now, there were a couple of calls against the Wildcats that I believe were called as blocking fouls. I believe that happened twice. And I recently have said this, like, that was a well-officiated game. This was a well-officiated game, but there were points in this game where it's just like, that's not a block, that's a charge. That was, even the SEC Network broadcast crew was like, normally we advocate against all these charges that are being called, but they're like, Kentucky did not initiate that contact, I'll tell you what. And it was right. It was right. Like, there should not have been a blocking foul called. It was just there were some points in this game. Just like, what's going on here, guys? Like, come on. But that's your average college basketball officiating crew nowadays. Just like, you get about 5 or 6 of those games. Just like, what? Anyway, my 4 parameters for Wildcat wins. Did Kentucky shoot the ball well? That is one of them. Well, like I mentioned earlier, Kentucky shot 60% from the floor, 42.9% from 3. Love to see it. So, yes, Kentucky did shoot the ball well. Did the Wildcats have decent shot selection? This is not asking for perfect shot selection. This is not asking for great shot selection. This is asking for decent shot selection. I think the Wildcats did. There were a couple shots that I didn't like, specifically looking at Jacob Toppin and Keon Brooks, but, I mean, still knocked them down at a really high rate, so can you really complain? Did Kentucky, third parameter here, did Kentucky have decent, or play well in transition? Excuse me, I'm all over the place right now. Did Kentucky play well in transition? That's for both offensively and defensively. Well, I would say in the first half, Kentucky absolutely crushed Ole Miss in transition because there were points where Ole Miss had opportunities to push the ball up the court, and they decided not to. I got a text from one of my friends. It was like, I bet Kermit Davis makes these players practice with walkers so that they make sure they don't push the ball up the court hard enough. And I responded, I'm like, yeah, you saw that guy that just subbed in. He pushed him harder than he pushes the players in practice. That's a joke. That's a joke. I don't actually mean that. Kermit Davis, I think, is actually a pretty decent coach. But Ole Miss played awful in transition, in my opinion, in this game. And the fact that Kentucky only finished with 11 fast break points is shocking to me. But also, I think the Rebels did a really good job of slowing this game down in the second half. But yes, I think Kentucky definitely won the battle there in transition. And the final thing here, did Kentucky protect the rim? No. They've not done it for a couple of games now. Only had one block in this matchup. Of course, Ole Miss had none, so woohoo. But Kentucky did not do a great job, and they didn't do a great job of this against Arkansas either, of like making sure that drives to the rim are protected and dump-offs are protected, and that Tshiebwe can actually play a little bit of defense against an opposing team's big man one-on-one. Typically, he wins that battle. Did not win it a whole lot today. Also got called for a couple of fouls. Had 3 personal fouls in this game. So I think Kentucky checked 3 of the 4 boxes. Overall, this is a game at home. This is kind of not necessarily a tune-up game, but it's kind of feels like a tune-up game. And you also get to play Florida, which kind of is a tune-up game here to end the regular season. We're seeing right now that the top 4 teams in the SEC are very clearly Kentucky, Auburn, Arkansas, and Tennessee. Those are going to be your 4 seeds that are going to be the top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament. Now, the ordering of that is still in question because Auburn still has to play 2 teams that they could legitimately lose to. And then Tennessee barely beat Georgia, which was wild to me. And then Arkansas has a couple games. I believe they play LSU and Tennessee to wrap stuff up. So there's some interesting things that could happen with the top 4 and their seeding, but those are going to be the top 4 teams in the SEC tournament. Kentucky still has a shot to claim part of the SEC regular season title. We'll just have to see what Auburn does. I have a feeling they're going to choke against the Bulldogs today, but we'll just have to see. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show on Instagram at Kentucky Podcast. On tomorrow's episode, we sit down with Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC, just talking ball, talking about Kentucky's new offensive coordinator hire, and then just going around the SEC, just talking about whatever we feel like. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody, and God bless.